Welcome back. Syrian rebels have been celebrating after capturing the country's major city of Hama during their week-old advance across northern Syria. Celebratory gunfire could be heard in parts of the city, while some fighters were seen cheering and chanting on pickup trucks with horns blaring. The capture comes after the Syrian army said it was redeploying outside the city to preserve civilian lives and prevent urban combat after what it called intense clashes. Meanwhile, tens of thousands of people are fleeing Syria's third largest city, Homs, in fear that Islamist rebel groups will continue to advance towards the capital, Damascus. And the United Nations is calling for an end to bloodshed in Syria, urging all parties to protect civilians. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres also called for an immediate humanitarian access to all civilians in need. Last week, the rebels took the main northern city of Aleppo and have since pushed south from their enclave in northwest Syria.
I want to say a few words about the grave and dramatic developments in Syria unfolding before our eyes. I just spoke with President Erdogan of Turkey to discuss the latest. I emphasized the urgent need for immediate humanitarian access to all civilians in need and the return to the UN-facilitated political process to end the bloodshed. All parties are obligated under international law to protect civilians. Now, this latest offensive was launched into government-controlled areas by Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, a group sanctioned by the Security Council, along with a broad range of other armed opposition groups. It has led to significant shifts in the front lines, and tens of thousands of civilians are at risk in a region already on fire. We are seeing the bitter fruits of a chronic collective failure of previous de-escalation arrangements to produce a genuine nationwide ceasefire or a serious political process to implement Security Council resolutions. These must change. After 14 years of conflict, it is high time for all parties to engage seriously with Geir Pedersen, my special envoy for Syria, to finally chart a new, inclusive and comprehensive approach to resolving this crisis in line with Security Council Resolution 2254. It's time for serious dialogue.
Meanwhile, the United Nations World Food Programme says 1.5 million people are expected to be displaced due to the recent fighting in Syria's northwest. As it stands, almost 280,000 people have been displaced so far since November 27. The World Food Programme is calling for an urgent funding to provide support to humanitarian partners.
In the first few hours after the 27th of November, we saw that the number went up from 48,000 to almost 280,000 people who got displaced so far. And if the situation continues evolving in that pace, we're expecting collectively around 1.5 million people that will be displaced and will be requiring our support. The situation in Syria was not easy before this escalation. So we're looking at a crisis on top of crisis, and that's why we're really emphasizing the urgent need for funding, flexible funding, so that we can actually support all the efforts for the humanitarian partners to pre-position and be able to ready for any scenario that basically in terms of displacements that could evolve in the coming days or months. But the figures we have in front of us is 280,000 people since the 27th of November. That's the updated figure we have as of last night. And that does not include the figure of people who fled from Lebanon during the recent escalations. That's just in the northwest Syria.
Well, France is facing both a political and an economic crisis after government failed to agree on a controversial budget proposal. In a televised address to the nation on Thursday night, President Emmanuel Macron said he would appoint a new prime minister in the coming days and accused his opponents of putting their political ambitions over the best interest of their country. He also reaffirmed he would stay on until the end of his mandate, due in May 2027. French left-wing leader Jean-Luc Mélenchon has said that the no-confidence vote was aimed at President Macron and not former Prime Minister Michel Barnier. To talk more about this, I'm joined now by DW correspondent Kate Ferguson. Kate, great to see you today. Talk us through how France has ended up in this mess.
So France's government has been in a state of disarray since last July, really, when President Macron called snap elections. They were supposed to strengthen his mandate, but instead they weakened him dramatically, resulting in a parliament where no party or faction has a clear majority. Now, the trigger for all the chaos this week was a plan by the Prime Minister to push next year's budget through without a parliamentary vote. And this in turn prompted the far right and the far left to team up to issue a vote of no confidence in the Prime Minister Michel Barnier, which he lost. Now, if you consider what that budget entails, it's not surprising that it was so unpopular. France is under huge pressure to address its ballooning debt problem. And this budget was intended to save around 60 billion euros by cutting spending on things like pensions and healthcare, as well as increasing corporate taxes. Now, these reforms are needed to secure France's economic stability, but at present it's unclear if they'll be implemented at all, meaning an extended period of uncertainty appears inevitable at this point.
Now, this uncertainty is also likely to have a huge economic impact, isn't it?
Yeah, it's already having a serious economic impact. Just last week, France's borrowing costs hit the same level as Greece's. Now, this was extremely psychologically significant because, as you might remember, during the financial crisis of 2009, Greece was this poster child for irresponsible spending. It defaulted on its debt and it received a bailout, but on condition of imposing very strict austerity measures. Now, France's finance minister has been trying to reassure people. He's been saying, look, France is not the same as Greece. But the bond markets, for a time at least, disagreed with that assessment. France's public debt really is very high. It stands at around 110% of its total economic output. And just for context, that's almost twice that of Germany's, for example. So fears that this debt could become completely unsustainable have made investors very wary. And if this political instability endures, which it's likely to, it's also going to have a big impact on growth because businesses need clarity. And at the moment, they have anything but that.
And it's not just France, is it, Kate? Germany's government has also recently crumbled. What impact is all this instability having on Europe as a whole?
Yeah, that's true. Germany is also facing a period of extreme uncertainty after the recent collapse of its government. Also, I should say, over a failure to agree on economic policy. Now, France and Germany have some problems in common. Companies in both countries are suffering as a result of higher energy costs and also increased competition with China. And when it comes to debt, though, they actually have opposite problems because Germany has a constitutionally enshrined limit on how much it can borrow. These strict rules date back to the financial crisis when Germany was positioning itself as this beacon of fiscal stability. But critics now say that it's led to severe underinvestment that's been exemplified by crumbling rail infrastructure and even the collapse of a bridge in the city of Dresden some months ago. So overall, the fact that Europe's two biggest powers have neither a functioning government nor a clear economic plan right now is a very worrying development, especially at a time when strong leadership and unity is so desperately needed as Europe is facing the threat of tariffs on the one hand from the United States, as well as serious questions about its defense capabilities.
Right, Kate, thanks again. Well, staying in France, where the final countdown has begun ahead of the reopening of the Notre Dame Cathedral tomorrow. The reopening comes after more than 5 years of reconstruction work following a massive fire on April the 15th, 2019, that heavily damaged the roof of the cathedral and led to its spire to crumble. The opening ceremony is planned for the Saturday evening, followed by days of special masses to thank those who helped save and rebuild the building. Around 50 heads of state and governments are expected in the French capital for the ceremony. UK's Prince William and US President-elect Donald Trump are also expected to attend. tomorrow's opening ceremony. Choristers got busy today with rehearsals as solemn hymns echoed within the walls of the Maîtrise de Notre-Dame de Paris Choir School. The 850-year-old choir school with students aged 5 to 28 will perform during the inauguration events of the rebuilt landmark cathedral. Around 30 choir singers rehearsed in the school near the cathedral. Normally, the choir would train inside Notre Dame, but they could not this time because the reconstruction is still being finalized. Elsewhere, worshippers were forced to flee the scene after an Australian synagogue was set on fire in what is being condemned as an act of hate. According to community leaders, a few people were inside at the time for morning prayers when fire bombs were hurled at the building. Another witness claimed 2 masked people appear to have spread accelerant inside the building. 1 person was injured and the fire caused extensive damage. Prime Minister Anthony Albanese says the act was clearly intended to create fear in the community.
This was a shocking incident. Should be unequivocally condemned. There's no place in Australia for an outrage such as this. To attack a place of worship is an attack on Australian values. To attack a synagogue is an act of anti-Semitism. Is attacking the right that all Australians should have to practice their faith in peace and security. They engage in peaceful activity, they provide support for each other. This is the heartland of the community, and the police, of course, Victoria Police are leading the investigation. We know that 2 people were seen spreading some sort of fluid to encourage a fire and spreading it with brooms. And they were seen. There's CCTV footage that'll be examined. The police will do their job. And I've spoken with the head of the AFP, and all resources that are requested from the AFP and from federal agencies will be available, because it's important that these people be held to account for what is a shocking crime.
Elsewhere now, Hezbollah leader Naim Qassem has said that the group has not paid out more than $50 million cash gifts to more than 170,000 families affected by war with Israel. Hezbollah thanks Iran for its financial support, seeking to shore up its support base after a devastating conflict with Israel. Hezbollah also says it will provide a sum of $8,000 to those whose primary homes were destroyed in the war, plus $6,000 for a year of rent for those living in Beirut or its suburbs, and $4,000 for those living outside the capital until they can move back home. The United States has opposed reports by Amnesty International accusing Israel of committing genocide against Palestinians in Gaza. Speaking to reporters, U.S. State Department's deputy spokesperson Vedant Patel said Washington does not agree with Amnesty's past her findings regarding genocide, indicating the U.S. will always maintain its stance for Israel to comply with international humanitarian law.
I've seen the reporting about the report, and I will let Amnesty International speak to the details about it. As you've heard us say previously, Saeed, we disagree with the conclusions of such a report. We have said previously and continue to find that the allegations of genocide are unfounded, but there continues to be a vital role that civil society organizations like Amnesty International and human rights groups and NGOs play in providing information and analysis as it relates to Gaza and what's going on. But again, as I've said before, that we do not and have not concurred with these past findings regarding genocide. That does not change or alter the continued concern that we have as it relates to the humanitarian situation in Gaza. It does not change the continued concern that we have as it relates to this conflict's impact on civilians and civilian casualties. And we continue to stress at every turn that there is a moral and strategic priority for Israel to comply with international humanitarian law. And that is something we're going to continue to raise with partners in the region and directly with Israel. But ultimately, Saeed, truly the best thing that can happen if we want to see improvement in the humanitarian conditions in Gaza, if we want to see the remaining hostages return home, and if we want to see an end to the conflict, is for the parties to work towards an agreement to stop the war. And that's what we're continuing to be focused on.
Russian President Vladimir Putin has appointed Alexander Kinstein as the acting governor of southern Kursk region. Mr. Putin stressed that crisis management was needed in the area, which has been partly occupied by Ukrainian forces since August. Kinstein, in addition to his experience in the legislature, had acted for 2 years as an advisor to Russia's National Guard. Mr. Putin says his experience in the security forces will have to be used to achieve the tasks ahead. In the meantime, Ukraine is urging the United Nations to help repatriate Ukrainian children who were allegedly taken by Russia in the course of the war. Speaking on the sidelines of a UN Security Council meeting, advisor to head of the Office of Ukraine's President, Daria Starivina, says Russia does not understand the language of negotiations and only understands the language of power. Her comments come after a report published by Yale School of Public Health found that Russian presidential aircraft and funds were used in a program that took children from occupied Ukrainian territories, stripped them of Ukrainian identity, and placed them with Russian families.
What we need to understand, this is not only about Ukraine, this is not only about Ukrainian children. This is in general about principles, and this is also about the fact that Russia understands only the language of power. They don't understand the language of negotiations, they break the international humanitarian law, and this is why this is crucially important that the world stands for these principles, and that we stand for the children of the whole world. So we will be sure that the other countries and other regimes will not break the rules the same as Russia do now. I think that it's obvious that Putin is responsible for this systematic approach and systematical policy on illegal deportation and forced transfers and forced citizenship of Ukrainian children. And he also stands behind this legislative novella, which makes the process of stepping out from Ukrainian citizenship the easier one, and this is obvious that these all are the parts of the state policy.
Well, the year 2024 has been a year of elections for many countries across the world. Here in Africa, over 15 countries have held elections this year, either local, parliamentary, or presidential elections. Now it's Ghana's turn, with nearly 18.8 million registered voters expected to head to the polls on Saturday, December 7, in the country's 9th general election since returning to multi-party democracy in the early 1990s. There are two main candidates vying for the presidential seat: former President John Mahama, leader of the main opposition National Democratic Congress, and Vice President Mahamudu Bawumia, the flag bearer of the ruling New Patriotic Party. They both staged rival rallies in the capital, Accra, on Thursday evening, courting voters in a final push ahead of the legislative and presidential polls. In South Africa, an unknown number of illegal miners are still trapped underground in Stilfontein, Northwest Province. The miners have been sending up letters pleading for food, medication, and the swift rescue of the sick. On Wednesday, the bodies of several deceased illegal miners were brought to the surface. Meanwhile, the South African National Civics Organization is warning that more miners will die underground unless the government intervenes to provide assistance. Our South Africa correspondent, Innocent Simosa, has more.
The 11th body was retrieved on Tuesday by community volunteers who lowered the food down to the trapped miners locally known as the Zamazamas. The same day, a message written in blue ink on a white piece of paper was hoisted from the underground by community members where illegal miners asked for beef. Now, the food items that were delivered include instant porridge and water. They were delivered after a court order allowed the community in Stilfontein to provide food for the trapped miners. On Sunday, the Mining Affected Community in Action, a community-based organization, filed an urgent application at the North Gauteng High Court in Pretoria. The group is seeking a court order to compel the government to provide humanitarian aid to miners. Mzwandile Nkwayi is community leader, expressed concern over the government's handling of the situation.
We managed to take out 11 people that are alive and one dead body. But since from 2 days back, we managed to retrieve, to take out 6 dead bodies.
Nkwayi is calling for better management of the crisis.
Their plan that didn't work, so we are still using our plan that we are using the ropes to take those people outside.
This is where they burned belongings of the illegal miners who unfortunately did not make it alive to the surface. Channels Television spoke to Mandla Charles, who recently emerged from the mine shaft, painted a grim picture of the conditions underground.
It's challenging there. People are dying, people are sick, and some can't even get treatment. You know, it's a very devastating time. Coming out was very difficult as well. For example, some of the people I came out with fell down and died. Only 3 of them survived.
Mining analyst Peter Major says that it will take a long time to resolve the crisis.
Unfortunately, the negative legislation put 400,000 gold miners out of work, put another 50,000 other miners out of work. A lot of those were foreign miners that came here because they had no other job. And even the local miners, that's what they were good at.
Well, community members here continues to blame the government for what they call mishandling of this situation. But of course, we've not had the opportunity to speak to the leadership here or officials simply because of protocol. From Stilfontein in the northwest South Africa, Innocent Simosa, Channels Television News.
3, 2, 1, light that tree!
Atlanta's Hartsfield-Jackson Airport, the busiest in the world, has officially unlocked the Christmas season by celebrating its annual tree lighting ceremony. The event featured performances by the K.R. Pace School of the Arts Choir and live musicians playing in front of a Christmas tree in the domestic terminal. The airport uses the festive period to spread holiday cheer to millions of travelers expected this season.
We were just talking about that. I said, this is a wonderful time to be here. That just everybody looks so upbeat and happy, and the program was wonderful. It was very entertaining. The the choir was precious.
It's important for us to have some kind of holiday celebration because we have millions of passengers that will be traveling through, and we want to make sure that they feel the festive vibe as they're going to visit family and friends throughout the country.
It's always very busy, but it's the time that when we can go and see our family. And we have family that live there, and they've got like 4 feet of snow on the ground. That's why we're so heavily dressed, because when we get off the plane, it's going to be busy. But this is the time for us to go and see that family and share Christmas with them.
I wouldn't have to do it if I didn't have to. It's just too chaotic coming from New York, a busy hub to a busy hub.
It's been easier this year than last year. I guess I'm a little bit more experienced with airports and whatnot. Pre-check has been a blessing as well, so I can't complain. But it's been a little bit much more easier. Canceled flights have been not as bad as last year.
Well, no cancelled flights at the White House because U.S. President Joe Biden has attended the annual U.S. National Christmas Tree lighting ceremony, the last of his presidency, in Washington. For over 100 years, this cherished tradition has marked the start of the holiday season in the U.S. Capitol. President Biden kicked off the holiday season calling for love, kindness, and compassion among Americans.
Merry Christmas, everyone. Merry Christmas. This Christmas tree lighting is one of my wife Jill's favorite events, so she truly regrets not being here tonight. Merry Christmas, America. Merry Christmas to all of you. May God bless you all, and may God protect our troops. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Well, that's our show today, the last for this week. Thank you so much for watching. Joker Rogers.